thing. We have this agenda is a few speakers at the front to really set the context of the subject, and then we'll have a quick brainstorm. But this is really the start of a process. We're trying to start a process on how do we prioritize island biodiversity, whether it's in the convention or globally, etc. Yeah. So our speaking, I'll probably just get started. I'm Kate Brown with the Global Island Partnership, and we've been involved in working on the program of work on island biodiversity since it started. So we'll talk a little bit about the program of work, but it's really more about island biodiversity as a subject. But you'll hear some things that are to do with the convention. I know as we kind of roll into this, I just want to remind us a little bit about the program of work on island biodiversity. If you can move to the next slide. Voila. Next slide. So we had in a long time ago this program of work, I think back in 2003, 2004, island states and countries with islands were advocating for greater attention on island biodiversity and within the convention. And this is the same thing that we saw last year in October in Colombia. This real push for how island biodiversity as the subject and the program of work as really the roadmap for doing that can have greater attention within the convention and in these meetings that they have. Next slide. And we'll send you this. I'm not going to go into all of these points, but it was very important. It was the last one adopted, and it was dedicated solely to the fragileness and uniqueness of island biodiversity. Next slide. The principles were that island ecosystems were particularly unique. It specifically focused on things that were related to problems for vulnerable island biodiversity. It recognized that it was of global significance and that it needed increased attention at the global scale. So that was like 20 years ago, the program of work. The program of work still exists. Carry on. Just reminding us that 11% of the world's population live on islands. So and this is a breakdown that there's like 39 small island developing states, 14 island countries, 82 countries with islands. So of the CBD parties, 135 actually have an island. Next slide.
I know.
Oh, Carolyn, I think you're not on mute.
Thank you for being me.
Oh, you're welcome.
Carolyn.
And you have.
Yeah, can you mute? Sorry. Thank you. So I think why it was special because it dealt with island biodiversity in an integrated way. And I encourage everyone, if you haven't looked at the program of work on island biodiversity, to do so. It's on the CBD's website. It applies to all islands, so not just SIDS, it's all islands. And it created some new connections and partners, including the Global Island Partnership came out of this process. I think what it did really well is focus resources, focus on island leadership, and increase visibility. Next slide. This is a timeline. It's just showing that there was a lot of effort put in. There's been reviews. There's lots of documents on the CBD's website about the importance of island biodiversity. Next slide. I think in 2012, we worked with the CBD Secretariat on a review of the program of work. It showed that there'd been significant leveraging, attention, and action. So, as we think about how do we increase visibility again, there is a reason for that. It has helped, and it also helped to leverage funding specifically for islands. Next slide. There were a lot of gaps identified, and those same gaps have been identified again. The same ones of lack of funds, lack of capacity, etc. And then it also came up with some ways that implementation could be strengthened. Next slide. And then there was a not as in-depth review, but a review of the program of work over the last year or two since 2022, CBD COP15 and Substance 26. And I think there were some reflections, this was before it was in the CBD COP, that it really is consistent with the Global Biodiversity Framework vision and mission. But there's some things missing that have kind of came since like SDGs, biodiversity and health, etc. And if we move to the last slide, we can see that at COP16, it recognised that the programme of work still corresponds to global priorities and gives essential support to implement the new global biodiversity framework. But again, it found areas not implemented, not fully implemented. So, with the focus on implementation around financial resources, capacity building and development, the same things that have been identified for 20 years. So there's more work to be done, basically, and some more gaps were identified. And so that's kind of a very quick summary of the program of work on island biodiversity. It was pushed by islands as important. And I think I'm going to pass to Spencer Thomas to just talk about someone that was involved for a long time in that program of work and its implementation. Spencer, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kate. I'll just take a minute or two just to say maybe a couple of things. Of course, you have given a really good background on the whole question of the island biodiversity program of work, and I think the PowerPoint will be made available, so I wouldn't go back on that. I would just want to make maybe 3 points. The first one, and to focus more on GLISPA within the context of Island Biodiversity Program of Work. The first point is that GLISPA was born out of the CBD, right? There were, at that point in time, focus on thematics, coastal biodiversity, mountain biodiversity, agricultural biodiversity, and of course, there was a very strong lobby to have the Island Biodiversity Program of Work, which eventually agreed by the COP. And there were several reasons why this was agreed. As indicated, the focus was not on island states as a political construct. It was on an ecosystem, the ecosystem of islands. So that means many countries. There are several countries in the world that have islands as part of their ecosystems, and that was one of the key reasons why we felt that some of the problems that occur in island states are some of the same problems that occur on islands everywhere across the world. So that was very, very important. And another point I want to make, this maybe the second point, is that we didn't just take the Island Biodiversity Program of Work and just nilly-willy follow it. There was very strategic thinking for GLISPA. GLISPA had some serious strategic thinking as to exactly what will be the mission and the vision, and how will GLISPA help to implement the program of work on biodiversity. And I think we have done that over the years. Several times we have re-examined the strategic thinking of GLISPA and how it is moving forward in terms of the program of work. I believe now with this new geopolitical environment, it might be another opportunity again to look closer at how we will be planning and strategic planning for GLISPA as we go forward. The whole question, what we tried to do in the early days, have been realized to raise the visibility of islands in the convention and all of these things happen. It can be waned over time, so I think we have an opportunity now, given the new dynamics in the atmosphere, to have a closer look at GLISPA as it functions within the context of the implementation of the Biodiversity Convention. And of course, we do have the new biodiversity plan. And again, there is also the Biodiversity Fund. So we'll have to see how GLISPA now will be working with the new construct in biodiversity. And to maintain its focus, as indicated, on the convention of biodiversity. I know there is a lot of reasons why we would have had to go into areas in other conventions, but I believe we need to stay at home. Of course, give due recognition to things that are happening, and because of course there is a nexus between biodiversity and other conventions. But I believe that the focus has always been, and will always be, galvanizing leadership and action for biodiversity conservation and so on from an island's perspective. And we do have, as indicated earlier, real examples from islands that we can use as best practice into the global atmosphere. I think that was what GLISPA was created for, and I think we need to recognize and maybe have a strategic session to either reinforce our values and missions, or to fit the current environment that we're in. Thank you.
Thank you, Spencer. And Spencer's on the board of GLISPA and one of our founders. I think Joe Appiott from the CBD Secretariat, who deals with the islands at the CBD Secretariat, is going to reflect a little bit on what came out of COP16 and some other points. Over to you, Joe.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you. Thanks for organizing this call. It's really important. Useful and important for us, obviously, in the Secretariat, because there's only so much that we can do from the Secretariat side. We're a facilitation sort of entity, so it's important that these kinds of ideas and strategizing happen with the key players, with parties and other key players out there. So happy to comment on this. I'll give a little bit of an overview, very brief, of just some of the major happenings at COP in Cali, and then also what still remains to be discussed at the upcoming resumed COP in Rome in a few weeks. So this COP in Cali was actually a very high profile COP. It was actually the most attended COP that we've ever had in the history of the convention. For those of you that were there, it's probably no surprise, but nonetheless, obviously a really key indication of not only the increasing focus on biodiversity as a cross-cutting issue, but also the important role of the CBD and discussions under the CBD in that regard. There were a number of so-called big ticket items for this COP, very specific, and in some cases some big cross-cutting things as well as some very specific issues. And some of those were resolved in Cali, and some of them were not, and still have to be ironed out. So the things that we did achieve in Cali, and again, I'm just giving a snapshot. There's many items, and this is something I'll come back to later. Is that we have an enormous amount of items that are discussed under the CBD, but some of the big high-profile ones were the finalization of a global multilateral benefit sharing mechanism for digital sequence information, or DSI, and the creation of a new fund related to that, the Cali Fund, so-called, as it's called, which is a huge achievement, and also I think does present some opportunities for islands and for its genetic resources that reside in islands. The adoption of a new program of work on Indigenous peoples and local communities, IPLCs, as it's called here, has always been an issue, but the elevation of that issue to the level of a program of work and the creation of a new subsidiary body for IPLCs is really important, and I think again puts the convention really at the forefront of this issue globally in terms of all the various global processes, and also obviously has a lot of relevance to various islands around the world. We did have finally, after about 8 years of negotiations, the adoption of the continuation, the adoption of new processes for the EBSA process. The EBSA's ecologically or biologically significant marine areas was basically stalled for many years now, largely due to political issues, but we after some intense discussions, parties were able to arrive at new modalities and mechanisms for that process, which were a really important part of the marine work under the convention. Then also focusing a bit more and bringing us back to some of the things that we're interested in, of course, was an additional decision on marine and island issues, and in that decision, the identification of gaps and areas in need of additional work in the marine program of work and in the islands program of work. I'll come back to that in a second, but just then to say that the issues that were not resolved, that are, I think, more of the cross-cutting issues that are very important to the convention overall, are and things that are still to be discussed and hopefully finalized in Rome, are resource mobilization, continued discussions on the operationalizing the resource mobilization strategy for the GBF, for the Global Biodiversity Framework, as well as finalizing the monitoring framework and indicators for the Global Biodiversity Framework, and then also mechanisms for planning, monitoring, reporting, and review, which includes national reporting as well as mechanisms for a global review of progress, a COP-led global review of progress towards the targets, which we haven't really had that kind of mechanism in the past. It's been a bit more ad hoc. Then turning back to the island issue, I think one thing that we have to, and kind of taking stock of the island program of work and the decision at COP. First, we have to, it's clear that, and when we embarked on this work, it was clear that the island program of work was really comprehensive. It is really comprehensive. It's very robust. I mean, even looking at compared to the marine program of work, I mean, literally when we were reviewing, looking at the program of work, we said, my God, this already says everything. So there was actually a bit of a challenge to identify real gaps, so to speak. But there were some gaps in some areas where island parties and parties overall felt the need to elevate some additional focus. That new decision certainly does not replace the program of work. What it merely does is updates it, so to speak, and updates it in a way that says everything that is there is still completely and even more valid, perhaps, than it was back in the day when it was adopted. But there are some things that we need perhaps to have additional focus and attention on under the convention. It wasn't an analysis to look at the gaps in implementation. It was an analysis to look at gaps in what the convention has been talking about with respect to these issues, and that includes both in the program of work as well as subsequent decisions. So it certainly doesn't talk about lack of gaps in implementation, of which we know that is a whole other ballgame, in which we know that is a big challenge and an issue. It also came against a very difficult discussion within the convention and within the bureaus in particular about how to go about doing these kinds of analyses of the program of work. Years ago, most of the work under the convention was driven and oriented around programs of work. Over time, things started to change a little bit. Especially after the adoption of the Aichi targets. It became a bit more of a focus in some of these different areas on specific initiatives or specific areas of work, on targets, on target-based initiatives and target-based work. And the profile of the programs of work overall started to get a little bit lower overall and be a little bit lost in the convention. Some parties were okay with this. Some parties really didn't like this and wanted to kind of go back or at least take stock of the programs of work. So this effort to review the Marine and the Islands program of work, we were the first ones to do this in the convention. And what we are expecting now, as far as we know, of course, the bureaus have to set the agendas, is that other programs of work will now continue to be reviewed in a similar manner to what we've done. Actually, many parties like this approach of this kind of streamlined review and identifying gaps. And we expect that this will be done in the next few COPs, looking at some additional programs of work. Not all programs of work at the next COP, but some additional programs of work at each COP moving ahead. And I think agriculture, for example, will be next. What we also heard very well is that we heard a number of statements, both at Substa and at COP, including at the adoption of this agenda, at the adoption of this decision. Island parties, and I believe it was Cook Islands on behalf of the PSIDs, stating very clearly that they see an important need and they do want an island item, a dedicated island item at future COP, which of course I myself am very sympathetic to and supportive of. Of course, one of the challenges of COPs is that it's a cycle, right? So typically the agenda items that come at COP, they come from Substa, and those items that come from Substa or SBI come because there was work that was requested from a previous COP. So once you're out of the cycle, it's hard to get back in. You have to have a clear, I mean, it's up to the bureaus and the parties to put the items there, of course, but you have to there has to be a case made, unfortunately, so to speak. I think a strong a strong voice was put to that case. Parties want that, and parties are in the driving seat, so it's indeed their right to do that. But I think what would be really important and useful, and we've already had some discussions with GLISPA and with SPREP and a few others about what that kind of item looks like moving forward. It of course is important to have an item like that to elevate the attention of this issue, to continue to reiterate the importance of this issue in the implementation of the GBF and the convention overall. But this is a key time for parties and for the island world to be very strategic in saying what kinds of initiatives or energy or things can we catalyze from this, similar to the success story that we had with GLISPA and other initiatives, which, as Spencer said, emerged from the CBD. This is another opportunity for us to reinvigorate the focus on islands, to bring it again to the forefront of the profile of the convention, and also think creatively about what can be catalyzed or reinvigorated in the broader island space through this elevated attention in the convention. So right now we're at a key time for doing that, because the bureaus will soon be setting the agendas for the next Substas. There's two meetings of Substa before the next COP, and discussions like this are very critical in thinking about what that item could look like and what future COP discussions could look like on island. So I'll stop there, and thanks for the time. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Joe. And Joe also is a GLSPA board member, so great to hear from you. We're going to hear a little bit from someone that's more in country, from Vanuatu, Rolenas Baereleo, and very apologizing if I mispronounce your name there. Rolenas, over to you. If you could introduce yourself and take it away. And welcome. Sorry, Rolenas, are you talking? We might be having a technical issue. Rolenas is coming to us from Vanuatu. Paula, could you just check in with him? And while we do that, we'll move to Teshia JnBaptiste from CARICOM. Teshia, over to you.
Thanks, Kate. It's a pleasure to meet everyone. I do have a very brief presentation. I make sure not to keep it too long. Just to set the context, and of course, this was a joint effort given the short time frame. So I'd like to recognize the focal point for Grenada, area St. Louis, who has been a huge proponent of ensuring that the Island Biodiversity Program of Work is included under the CBF and the GBF, as well as Dr. Patrick Chesney, who's a regional consultant who has done quite a lot of work with our member states preparing for the two previous 2022 preparatory workshop to prepare for COP15, as well as the previous COP last year. I guess sort of preaching to the choir with this slide here, not to deviate, I mean preaching to the converted in terms of knowing what is, in terms of when we look at the importance of the Caribbean region as a special area in terms of our unique biodiversity, socioeconomic impacts of climate change, and its recognition under the UN Resolution 75, 2014. In terms of the state of biodiversity in the Caribbean, we recognize that the Caribbean, I have some internet, so I have to turn up my video. The Caribbean, in terms of looking at the IBES reports on Caribbean as a hotspot for marine biodiversity, one of the key standouds of that 2019 IBES report was the nature of the contribution to our people in terms of our total ecosystem services in value, looking at on a yearly basis our highest values being notably in areas such as the Bahamas, Antigua and Barbuda with over US 20,000 per hectare per year, the St. Vincent and the Grenadine Islands, followed closely with US 17,000, and having groups of endemic species that have been assessed in terms of our risk extinction and other contributing factors in terms of looking at also the review of how well we're doing in terms of the IT targets that has been documented. What we've noted though is that there has been much human activities, including fossil fuel pollution, which has affected adversely on our terrestrial and marine ecosystems. We have at the regional level done some work in terms of looking at our regional frameworks, which intervene in terms of the concerns we have in our region. And just to give a brief overview of these, we note there is the Caribbean Environmental Natural Resource Policy Framework. CARICOM leads on that, the Common Fisheries Policy, at the sub-regional level, the St. George's Declaration and the OECS Biodiversity Ecosystem Strategy, and the Draft Caribbean Community Biodiversity Strategy. And of course, we know that many of our member states are in the process of aligning and updating the NBSAPs to the new Global Biodiversity Framework. As I indicated during the previous preparatory meetings, marine coastal biodiversity, including island biodiversity, was deemed a priority of our region. our member states. And some of the key messages going into the previous COP was to recognize that marine, coastal, and biodiversity is a common concern for our region. Looking to ensure that we address this priority, it requires increased public awareness, increasing data and information systems, and capacity building, highlighting the need for our effective implementation of the GBF through creating more stronger synergies with other MEAs, which align to the GBF activities, and specifically that of the UNFCCC. And of course, again, looking to ensure that there are strong linkages between monitoring biodiversity goals and targets in areas such as land degradation, neutrality indicators, and reporting and verification under the UNFCCC. So what has been the way forward for our member states when we think of island biodiversity? Securing our governments and policymakers buy-in has been essential. Encouraging more meaningful discussions about the linkages between other biodiversity, other MEAs, as I mentioned, climate change. We can also look at in terms of the BBNJ, the new plastics treaty, taking those into our discussions when we look at mainstreaming biodiversity into those areas, developing regional educational and awareness strategies from a top-bottom approach to ensure the case for biodiversity is presented to our policymakers to win political support, and of course, implementing of our regional biodiversity strategies and looking more closely at regional economic valuation and the benefits it can generate to biodiversity in terms of the levels of dependency versus threat, and that should be looked at per member state. There have been many opportunities, and certainly this meeting shows that the bilateral and multilateral relationships are key, ensuring that partners in terms of SID, South-South cooperation, triangular cooperation continues to ensure that biodiversity and island biodiversity remains at the forefront. Having meaningful involvement of our civil society groups is also essential. As I referenced the various policies, regional and sub-regional policies that enable our region to benefit from financial mechanisms, and of course, well thought out and implemented engagement strategies. We also have to note that there have been ongoing efforts at various levels to support our region in terms of focusing on biodiversity and island biodiversity. If we look specifically, for example, at the Samoa Pathway, which highlights under, I believe it's paragraph 90 of the declaration, which highlights the intrinsic link between SIDS and biodiversity. While there has been some progress with the CBD program of work for island biodiversity, there needs to be greater focus on specific vulnerabilities and special circumstances of SIDS, particularly when it relates to the acute gaps of SIDS in terms of means of implementation. So the Samoa Pathway through the Samoa Pathway and the SIDS Coalition, they've announced a call to action which looks to enhance means of implementation, looking specifically at the advancement of the program of work for island biodiversity to aid in the implementation of the GBF. And other areas as well, which continue to focus specifically on issues of island biodiversity. When we look closely at other opportunities there are for island biodiversity in the Caribbean, we have to continue to remain advocates for its inclusion in the GBF for the benefits of SIDS. There needs to be an inclusive approach to island biodiversity, namely the development of strategic review and analysis of the program of work in the context of the implementation of the GBF, and that will have to focus closely on key elements such as alignment and update of NBSAP's capacity building action, specifically for SIDS. I think that is it from my end. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That was awesome, and some good insights there from your region. I want to just check in on Rolenas to see if he is able to join. Because I think Paula was following up.
He has joined. He's able to hear us, but apparently
there may be some issue with the network, given that they recently had an earthquake, so that may be
Oh, yeah.
impacting him.
Yeah,
Hello,
so
can you hear me?
Rolenas. Oh, yes, we can hear you. Please.
Wait, I'm just sharing my screen with Rolenas. He will be using my headset to make comments regarding Vanuatu's context for island biodiversity.
Great. Thanks, Dean. And this will be great.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Thank you for the invitation, Paula. So our on the agenda, we are supposed to share our experience during COP16 and what we hope for in the recent COP. So for COP, during the COP in Cali, it was really a learning journey for Vanuatu. The team that came in, it was as a previous speaker has already mentioned, it was one of those COPs that there were more people, and for Vanuatu particularly, it was one that we brought in more people and across sectors. The reason being that it's about time we break the silos and start bringing in other sectors to ensure that we achieve the targets. So we've seen in the Aichi targets, we have achieved quite low during the Aichi targets. And so for us, it's important to start involving other sectors to really understand what the Department of Environment and the Ministry is doing at the international arena, or what we're negotiating, so that they can take it on board and do their part in turning the fight to reverse biodiversity loss and restore our island ecosystems. As we all know, island biodiversity is very important, given that a small country like Vanuatu, we depend heavily on our natural resources for our economy. And with that, it's very important for us to attend the COP16, and we look forward to for the recent COP, we'll stand ready to support the Pacific positions in towards reversing biodiversity loss. Thank you.
Thank you, Rolenas. And I also wanted to acknowledge, I think we had a briefing with your delegation and with Solomon Islands, together with the Micronesia Challenge, talking about the Micronesia Challenge and what Micronesia Challenge countries had achieved. I think there was interest in learning from that during the CBD COP in Cali, Colombia. So thank you to all our speakers. We've had a kind of brief snapshot, and this is really the start of a process, not the end of a process, because what we're trying to do is figure out, moving forward, what is our strategy for island biodiversity in the context of the convention, but more broadly in terms of implementation. So now we're actually, so you may have questions. If you do, please put them in the chat and answer them. But we will move into our next part, which is really looking at what our strategy is moving forward. And if you have any insights or other things that you want to share, please put them in the chat as well. We're going to move to something called Fig Jam to kind of have more of a brainstorming thing. So everyone on this call will be able to actually input your thoughts and things, and we'll start kind of pulling together some idea of where people are and where we want to be and who wants to be part of this process moving forward. I think if Paula shared that, so you don't have to sign in. It's a thing. If you move, I'll share my screen, so we'll just quickly run through how to do this. So we've got about 20 minutes. Yes, not a huge amount of time, but we can definitely get some ideas on paper in that time. And now I've forgotten how to share my screen. Where's the share button gone? Oh, there. Sorry. Coming. Yes, here we are. So if people can see my screen, when you get into Fig Jam, you'll see it. You might come in at this
Big
level.
screen.
You really want to you want to kind of zoom in and
Can't see the screen.
oh you
It's
can't.
not shared, Kate.
Oh, I didn't push the share part. Sorry. I told these people I'm the worst sharer, but anyway, here is what you kind of look at the big picture. What we're going to do in this, if we go to the blue, and you can just move it around with your mouse or the other board, is we're basically going to look at how to prioritize island biodiversity and increase collaboration and implementation. So we've been hearing about some things and some ideas from our really great range of speakers, but I'm sure that everyone else here has ideas as well. I added here some stuff around what we see coming out of the COP, and particularly in relation to the program of work. And then what we're going to try and come away with today is some idea of what we can do together and what we can try to accomplish, how we think we're going to get there, who is going to work on this, or who should be involved, including potential champions. And then after that, what we'll do is pull together all the notes, share the presentations and notes that were done, and form a working group on island biodiversity and work to implement the actions. Now, if we move over to the brainstorm side, it's numbered, so we're starting at number 1, and I just put some things in here that I heard. So two actually right. So down in the bottom here, see where it says sticky note? And you can make it any color. You can click down here, click a sticky note, and then start writing. If you don't want your sticky note to have your name on it, they automatically come up with your name. You can take it off here where it says show hide author. It's up to you. You can either have your name on there or not have your name on there. I put some here that we heard, which is supporting increased implementation on island biodiversity or galvanizing leadership and action. That a dedicated island agenda item at the COP. What are the things that you think from either your island or your work that you want to hear about? So now's your opportunity to use these sticky notes to type them in. And then after that, we'll move to the next one, which is what does success look like? So this is what we're trying to do, some things, but the other is what success looks like. So use the sticky notes, use this time. You have about 5 minutes on this, and you can move on to the next one. So number 2 is below, which is what success looks like. Number 3 is how we're going to get there, like what are our strategies? So we heard from Joe on the need to be strategic, so we have to integrate that. And then who should be involved? So who needs to be part of this conversation and this strategy? So over to you guys. You've got the link. Hopefully everyone's in there that can be. I see only 13 people, so that's a no that everyone is not in there. And put your thoughts, start brainstorming, and then we'll also, if you don't want to write it in, we can write it in for you. Just write it into the chat of Zoom. We know it can be annoying, so there's someone is managing to do it. So as I said, here's the sticky notes down the bottom. Just click on a sticky note and move it out. You can change the color of the sticky notes. When you click on it, you can have it any color, so green if you want a green one. And yeah, so that's it. So no more talking from me. Just spend your time. The things that you think are important. And if you see something that you find particularly kind of appeals to you, you think it makes a lot of sense, there's a stamp function here. So see where my mouse is, and you can stamp like you really like it, one of these things here, onto the thing. So like if I wanted to stamp on one of these above, I can do that. So also you can do that. Over to everyone. So you got a few minutes to do this, and then we'll move into the next thing. But your big ideas, this is the big idea time. What are we going to accomplish by working together, and what do we want to achieve?
Just to reiterate what Kate said, if you want to put your comments in the chat, we can transfer it across for the technologically challenged among us.
And you also, this will be up for the next 24 hours, so you'll be able to add things over time. What we're going to do is try and organize it a bit more thematically in the next phase, but we won't do that on this call.
Joe has his hand raised.
Joe.
Yes, sorry, I didn't. Thank you, and thank you for flagging that. I didn't want to interrupt any of this work, but one thing I did want to note in the context of the decision that was adopted in Cali, and something that could be a way for us to think about potentially what kinds of issues or areas of work might be an area of focus, is that all of those gaps and areas of further work that were identified in the COP decision. The COP identified that some of those issues may require more focused work under the convention, including things like the development of additional guidance or things of that nature. So a lot of those topics, so some of those topics that were identified in the list of gaps were things that are very clearly, already being discussed in other fora or maybe maybe in the UNFCCC or maybe in other types of processes. But there could be things in there, and I think there probably are things in there that are very much within the wheelhouse, so to speak, of the CBD. It's just up to parties to tell us if they think they want the convention to further explore those areas of work. So that's something to consider also in terms of opportunities, building on what happened at COP16, actually looking at some of those issues and saying, are there things that we think the CBD should dig into more, should perhaps develop guidance on, or should develop some new initiatives on, and that could be something that could spawn new areas of work within the convention on this on islands. So thanks.
Terrific. I think if you're so that's something to think about as we're inputting. If you want to get rid of the stamp function, just go to the far left here where I am, and you can choose a hand or a selector in case you can't get out of it, because I couldn't before either. Spencer, you want us to put that in? So Jabal's putting people that have put things in the chat into the thing. So I think you can still keep adding. As I said, you can keep adding for the next 24 hours to this. It's and we'll organize. If we might want to move down to what does success look like, and it's great that some people have put those things. Wow. There's some great answers there. So spend a few minutes looking at what you think success looks like. And as I said before, you can move to how we're going to get there. Did I write good time to be doing this? I think that was Joe's point. And then who should be involved? Like, I think that those are some of the things we can reflect on. Is it local communities more? Is it local NGOs? Is there people specifically that are real champions of this, of some of the things that you've talked about, that should be more involved in both this conversation and how we work together moving forward? I'll give you a few more minutes of that, and then we can talk through some of what's come out here. There's a great range of things on what can be accomplished by working together. Well, actually, I'll ask Jabal to talk about it. Jabal, you want to talk about that?
Sorry, Kate, I was busy copying and
Oh,
pasting.
do you want to talk about what some of the things are that have come out of the first one?
The first, what are we trying to accomplish?
Yes, exactly.
Hold on.
And I can copy and paste. See?
Let me zoom back out. All right, so we have things, well, the stuff that you put at the start, which was supporting increased implementation, galvanizing leadership and action, and a dedicated island agenda item at the COP, which is very broad level. But going into it, some people had some really cool suggestions. Laura had suggested that we galvanize funds for needed planning and implementation. And Claire suggested that more support be provided to island governments for the negotiation, and we should produce more short fact sheets and briefings, I guess, coming into COP so we are better prepared. Linking climate change, biodiversity, and ocean. So I think this is a point made by CARICOM as well, that we need to mainstream biodiversity across the other negotiation processes and multilateral agreements. We want different sectors across the government to understand the role they play in the biodiversity space and to do their part to reduce biodiversity loss. So more talking between sectors and less silos, I would say in a nutshell. Efficient reporting, simple and scientifically valid ways to meet the CBD reporting requirements by working together to have island relevant information shared. So simplifying the process so that we can better reach our targets. Being a stronger voice for oceans, working on regional knowledge strategies to better serve national strategies. This was one of the suggestions in the chat, in the Zoom chat. Spencer suggested that GLISPR's role be defined with respect to implementation of the program of work, and given these developments, both inside and outside the COP process. Work on regional strategies. Well, I said that one already. So yeah, that basically covers question 1. And we have a lot of thumbs up some of these things.
And some are just in the air over in the right. I think if you want to add anything, feel free to add anything or have clarification, and then maybe we can move on to what success looks like. Jamal, over to you.
All right, what does success looks like? Increase resources accessible to islands. And I guess this could be both funding as well as technical assistance, and maybe more South-South cooperation. Because we as islands, we have a lot to share with each other across regions, a lot of knowledge that we built up by ourselves that we can share and better scale. Models, lessons for biodiversity conservation on islands that are being promoted and adopted in other parts of the world. So yes, again, this is a key component of what GLISPR tries to do, trying to show the bright spots and show that we are leading in a lot of these things. We're not just victims, but we are part of the change and on the front lines in inspiring real global transformation. Strengthened island resilience, connections and coordinated action among different CIS regions. So a lot of similar themes coming out here that we can group together, which is part of the next steps. A whole of society and government approach to reverse and halt biodiversity loss. Increased island participation in the CBD leadership and decision making. Okay, very tangible, specific recommendation here that is measurable, I think. And yeah, that covers what we have so far under number 2. Not as many thumbs up and stamps, any number 2. The enthusiasm is starting to wane.
Okay, how are we going to get there?
How are we going to get there? That's, I think, the key question here, because I don't think we can get to it in this call alone, but this is the starting point in terms of starting to think of a strategy in terms of how we coalesce these ideas, these great ideas that are coming through. Increase collaboration and planning for ops and processes. So more of these coordination calls for one, I think, Kate. Need to be strategic. What types of initiatives and strategies can be catalyzed or reinvigorated in the island space?
Regarde l'écran.
Um,
Oups. C'est pour ça qu'il faut la rallonge.
sorry, I'm here. The next.
Sim, your phone is on.
He tips us off, so signals us out before, even though it's without losing any respect.
So you're not gonna.
We have a plug here for IntelliReefs Biodiversity Growth Modules, so be sure to check that out. There's a website. Now that we have carbon credit calculations, islands and island communities can have real revenues from carbon credit sales and long-term carbon storage revenues. So that's one avenue to explore. Taking a holistic approach at the government level, environment should be a pillar or key section in all countries' national sustainable plans. All actions on this pillar should be captured and aligned. So seeing what we are all doing at the government level and maybe trying to build on that both regionally and then internationally.
And finally, who should be involved?
Who are our champions? So Anne-Claire suggested that there are already specific countries designated as champions for specific topics under both the climate change and the biodiversity COPs. We need to clarify their mandates, so work on what is already existing and build on that, I think. I know she's on the call. If she wants to comment further on this, Anne-Claire, feel free. The second one is local communities and ways to build community-based monitoring and reporting systems, as now recognized in the Global Biodiversity Framework and COP decisions, and using existing relationships and groups. SIDS have some strong coordination mechanisms and frameworks. So you want?
Oh, Karen, you're off mute.
Okay.
Carry on, JnBaptiste.
So yeah, the last one was using existing relationships and groups. SIDS have some strong coordination mechanisms already and frameworks, and agencies, CARICOM, 5C, SPRAP, other Pacific crop agencies. So we need to coordinate more and share planning and not just try and create whole new systems of work. And I think that's what we want to do here at GLISPR. Try to really focus on making sure the existing coalition is dynamic and speaking to each other. And this is what this call is about in a nutshell.
Thank you, Jabal. That was great. Yes, as I said, keep adding things. I think we've got a lot to work on here. So our team will try to pull this into some group clustering themes, not on the call because we've only got 5 minutes left. And then we're going to come up with our actions, like next steps from these things. So, oh, look, there's already a thing here and next steps, a SIDS coordination at COP 16.2. I think there is a room available during the week and island coordination at COP 16.2 for island countries and like-minded countries with islands. So we have some immediate things that we can do to try and support this, specifically related to COP 16.2, which will take place shortly in Rome. At FAO headquarters. And so we'll be working with, I think we'll reach out to some of the regional agencies and see where we can work together and others in preparation for that, based on kind of some of the stuff that we've said over here, like this point here about a dedicated island agenda item at the COP. So with that, I think we've got a few minutes left. I just want to say thank you. I know this seemed like a very head-spinning fast-moving thing, working on global policy and also a little bit looking at how that looks at a local, much more local level. But it's the start of a process, as I said. If you want to be involved in this ongoing conversation, please contact us and let us know. And we'll send out the report of all of this to everyone that's on this call and others that said that they were interested in further information. And we're also really happy if you want to just talk one-on-one about anything that you've heard here, get more information, to have that conversation, because we're really trying to help facilitate a process that helps advance this work on island biodiversity. So are there any, I'll actually ask, maybe I'll ask Anne Claire and our SPREP colleagues if they want to say something quickly as well. Anne Claire, you still here?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting SPC to this meeting. On SPC side, unfortunately, we will not be there for the resume session of COP16 because we have at the same time our climate change flagship retreat, so nobody will be able to join, but for sure we will be more than happy to provide support on remotely, and especially in the resource mobilization session. So very happy to pursue the support to islands and more specifically to Pacific islands from SPC. I think that the added value of the support provided by SPREP and SPC is really to create these linkages between ocean biodiversity and climate change. And yeah, that's all on my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and Claire and Tiffany or Amanda, if you're here.
Yeah. Hi, Kate and everyone. Apologies, I did have to jump on and off, but I'm back on at the moment. So in terms of the Pacific and CBD COP, we'll be hosting a Pacific sort of online mini preparatory meeting next week. We're also trying to have conversations with SIDS, and like you said, at the COP, there is a room, and we're just still chasing down details of that, but we'll get that shared shortly. And look forward to, collaborating and looking at how we progress some of this. And I think CBD COP will give us a good opportunity to potentially get together and have these discussions.
Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone that joined. Really enjoyed kind of the insights from our speakers. And thank you for, I think, as I said, you've got 24 hours to add things, so don't feel like you haven't had your say. Maybe there's things that you really want to kind of put in this space. We'll make sure that everything that's been written in the chat moves itself into this, and then we'll come back with something. And I think on the CBD COP, I think we'll talk to CARICOM and SPREP and SPC and others to see how we can support heading into that, along with the particularly given the timing thing, particularly on trying this agenda item issue, because that we'll need to work on sooner rather than later. Okay, thank you, everyone. See you later. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.